Hillary Clinton, in her own words, on the election. Stunning words from her.
She's also refusing to accept blame for being on the wrong end of the biggest political upset in decades.
Hillary Clinton's account of what happened includes major media failures.
I don't think the press did their job.
The way she presented in the book is a little bit like it was our job to get Hillary Clinton elected.
If what they say is true and journalism really is the first rough draft of history, then the second draft often comes in the form of a book written by one of the principals, such as Hillary Clinton's take on what happened. That's the title of her new book published last week, and it's a statement, not a question. Clinton does start out by accepting responsibility for her failure to win the White House before moving on and sharing the blame. That's where the U.S. news media come in. Clinton's primary grievance with the coverage was the fixation on one story that during her time as U.S. Secretary of State, she used her family's private email server for official communications. She says that that story overshadowed any substantive reporting of her policies and that helped put Donald Trump in the Oval Office. But is that really what happened? Or was Hillary Clinton killed by the same media ecosystem that helped make her what she is or was? Our starting point this week is New York City. When playing the blame game, Hillary Clinton starts with herself. She says she was the candidate, she made the decisions, and takes responsibility for what happened, but not sole responsibility.
You have the FBI director saying what he said. We don't control the media environment the same way the right does.
The Russians are still messing with our democracy.
But I don't think the press did their job in this election.
On the media, there is data suggesting that more than a year before Election Day, the die had already been cast. The coverage was taking form. Gallup, the polling organization, asked Americans what topics they associated with Hillary Clinton compared to how they saw Donald Trump. The resulting word cloud paints a picture. U.S. news consumers primarily associated Clinton with her emails, the private server saga, not her policies. The Trump cloud was dominated by his immigration policy, with any personal issues limited to the fine print.
I do think there's some validity to it. Major outlets like the New York Times kind of made a mistake by treating the email scandal with the same weight that they treated Trump scandals would. In fact, there was never as much evidence to support that anything too nefarious went on with Clinton and her emails. But I think she overstates its influence a little bit.
Donald Trump was able to marry the spectacle of himself, and he is a spectacular person in the positive and negative connotations of that term to his ideas.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
He'd make a flamboyant speech about his wall and about his China policy or whatever. With Hillary Clinton, the only spectacle or drama people could find was this email drama, and whether there was something she was hiding. And by comparison, all the things she was saying on policy seemed tedious and boring and worthy.
The media's fixation on the Clinton private email server was a legitimate issue. It's pretty clear that Clinton set up the private server in her home to obscure her government records. That being said, the singular focus on those emails was a distraction from the major substantive policy issues. When NBC had a national security forum,
The presidential nominees will appear back-to-back tonight.
the host, Matt Lauer, asked 5 questions just on the private email server, kind of turning it into a very sensational story.
And in particular, concerning your use of your personal email. Were some of the emails sent or received by you? And some of the emails you sent to Secretary Clinton's personal email accounts.
Hillary Clinton is hardly the only losing candidate to decry the mainstream media's lack of substantive coverage of policy. It's a common refrain. However, the aversion to substance during campaigns is not limited to the journalistic side. It also occurs at the other end of the news cameras.
The Times and other papers could have handled it better, but at the same time, they gave Clinton the opportunity to go on the record about this through repeated interview requests to talk about policy issues that were important to her campaign. And time and again, she wouldn't open up her campaign to talk about even those kinds of issues. There was a suspicion that any interview she granted would be spun back onto the email issue.
Hillary Clinton raised hundreds of millions of dollars, spent much of that money on television and radio ads.
I'm Hillary Clinton, and I approve this message.
And most of those ads were not policy-based, right? They were focused on demonizing Trump, on accusing him of bigotry.
I'll go backstage before a show.
Of sexism.
I'd look her right in that fat, ugly face of hers.
Of being a crook.
I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody.
She didn't run any national television ads explaining her position on healthcare, on the environment, on taxes. That being said, it's also the media's fault. We did see a very tabloid-style coverage of the campaign, a lot of kind of personal discussion about personal attributes of the candidates, again, at the expense of a serious policy discussion.
Again, other politicians have faced that same dilemma. How much substance, how much exposure is best for the campaign? But no other American presidential nominee has been a woman. Gender is a recurring theme in Clinton's book. She talks of a continuing double standard, the need to be better and work harder than male politicians. And the one she was up against, debating against, was repeatedly labeled a misogynist.
Do you stay calm, keep smiling, and carry on as if he weren't repeatedly invading your space? Or do you turn, look him in the eye, and say loudly and clearly, "Back up, you creep. Get away from me. I know you love to intimidate women, but you can't intimidate me, so back up."
And Clinton was not just trying to get past Trump to a place no American woman has reached before. She was trying to get there, having previously played, in the eyes of the media, a supporting role, that of First Lady.
I do think you have to factor sexism into not only the outcome of the election, but the way it was covered. Maybe gendered is a better word to use. And when your husband becomes so famous for cheating on you, that just reinforces it and like further closes this trap in around you. And so I would say that we have to consider the influence of that and the role of implicit bias when it came to the way the media covered Clinton as a candidate.
The media didn't necessarily in its entirety treat her misogynistically, but it was refracting an incredibly structurally misogynistic society that does not envisage a woman as being president. And I think she had to fight against that. In this country, leadership qualities that are valued, charisma and strength, and people love it when Donald Trump claps his arms around and gets really angry. Hillary Clinton couldn't do any of those things because when a man does it, it's considered to be charismatic and strong, and when a woman does it, it's considered to be hectoring or screechy. I mean, I think there are a number of studies that would back that up.
It is hard to argue with what Hillary Clinton says about journalism and gender, or her criticism of the media failing to properly scrutinize candidate Trump until very late in the election cycle. What she conveniently fails to mention, or prefers to ignore, are the advantages she had. With the Washington Press Corps and news networks not named Fox,
than the inevitable Democratic nominee
that crowned her the presumptive Democratic nominee well before the first vote was cast in the primaries.
The question was not if, it was when and how.
The year leading up to the Democratic primary, the major network media outlets provided 120 minutes of coverage to Clinton and her campaign, and only 20 minutes to Bernie Sanders, and less than that for other Democratic candidates in this race. So the network news failed in many ways in terms of elevating the policy discussion and talking about the issues we face in society. At the same time, the network media was very friendly to Clinton and in a way provided kind of an assistance to her campaign by giving her much more coverage than her opponents.
What surprised me most about Hillary Clinton's book is, number one, it was interesting, but number two, it raised a challenge to the press that I think your program is dealing with and more of the press should do, which is that many institutions in the United States failed over the last year in creating the circumstances that gave us Donald Trump. The press needs to do as much self-examination as the parties themselves, as all the rest of the American fabric does. So I hope this will be a prod for some self-examination by the press.